Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Spawn Daily, a Comic Source, Comic Boom collaboration as we celebrate the 30th anniversary of Spawn by reading every issue of the main Spawn comic. So if you haven't been following along from the beginning, first of all, where you been? Second of all, it starts back in December, actually, when Rocky and I celebrated the 12 days of Spawnmas, much like the 12 days of Christmas, counting down 12 days to the 12th issue of Spawn, as opposed to Santa Claus coming down the chimney. So first 12 issues last month, and then starting in 2021, one issue a day, which brings us up to Spawn number 23 today, written and drawn by Todd McFarlane. He does give special thanks for the art to Greg Capullo, so I don't know if Capullo helped him out in some way. Tom Orzechowski's on letters, Steve Olaf on colors. It's part 3 of The Hunt, which we've covered part 1 and 2 yesterday and the day before. So again, go check those out. Fantastic cover from McFarlane, which showcases that face of Spawn, which we talked about extensively a couple of issues ago, being somehow split in half by a bullet right down the middle, and he's sewn together with a shoelace. So yeah, I mean, actually seeing it happen visually in the comic maybe doesn't make the most sense, but man, it looks great visually, so we're all for it. So yeah, I thought this was an okay issue. Like we mentioned last episode, it certainly is plenty expositional, as a lot of McFarlane's books are. But much like last issue, there's a couple of pages here or there where he basically slips into prose style, starting with the first page, which we referenced last issue. But again, this is part of sort of how comics were back in the 90s and even prior, right? Where the creators really took to heart the idea that every comic could be somebody's first. So you want to bring them up to speed on what's happening in the story. And McFarlane certainly does that with sort of a who's who on the first page. So yeah, it's solid enough and great concepts, if not a little dated. So what were your thoughts on the issue overall, Rocky?
Well, my thoughts overall on the issue were action-packed. Action-packed. I enjoyed it. It was, like I said, it was a lot of fun. It was very exposition heavy, which we've talked about before. That was McFarlane's sort of, I mean, like literally, you could pick up this issue fresh, and every single major player, Jason Wynn, Spawn, Vito Gavano, Wanda Blake, Sam and Twitch the detectives, and of course the situation that Spawn finds himself in, all very much narrated on pretty much the very first page, all set out for everyone to read and see. And again, beautiful art. Last issue ended with Overt-Kill, the new revitalized, sort of rehealed and new version of Overt-Kill is taking out Terry Fitzgerald, Terry Fitzgerald, who Vito, Jason Wynn has manipulated Vito into believing, Vito Gravano, Tony Twist, the mafioso, that Terrence Fitzgerald is in fact Spawn, who is responsible for destroying Vito's office and killing all those mobsters. It was actually the Violator that did that in the earlier issues, but Spawn was blamed, and for whatever reason, Vito now believes that Terry Fitzgerald is in fact Spawn. And Overt-Kill now, being told that Terry Fitzgerald is really Spawn, wants to kill Fitzgerald. Now, Spawn himself, Al Simmons, wants to make it over there. He knows Spawn has stole some informations from Vito Gravano's accountant, which apparently the accountant had information in terms of what Jason Wynn's machinations were and secrets. And so Spawn wants to go and help Terry, but unfortunately he's confronted by Sam and Twitch, who've been looking for him for quite a while, because when Spawn took out Billy Kincaid, the serial killer, Spawn had a sort of sense of humor and basically planted Billy Kincaid, hung Billy Kincaid in the office of Sam and Twitch at the police station. So they were investigated for their role in maybe the death of Billy Kincaid. So they're kind of pissed off at Spawn and they want to confront him. It's revealed here that Twitch, the detective Twitch, is actually a grade A shooter. He's actually, even though Sam and Twitch are polar opposites. Sam is a detective who's fat. Twitch is a detective who's very skinny. But it's revealed here, I believe for the first time. I always thought it looked, the way that McFarlane draws Twitch is a very skinny guy, and he's got this big honking gun, and it's almost kind of crazy, but apparently Twitch is he is a marksman. He is an expert marksman with his gun, and he uses it to great effect this issue. Sam and Twitch both confront Spawn. Spawn basically, though, runs off, and he leaves them, and Twitch shoots him, but shoots him and manages to hit him because he's a great marksman, but it doesn't have any effect on Spawn, of course, because it's Spawn, and Spawn he knows he has to get to Terry Fitzgerald, because Terry being his best friend, he wants to protect him from Overt-Kill. Meanwhile, Wanda is talking to her grandmother, and the grandma and her grandmother spoke with Spawn, or Al Simmons, and believes that refers to Al as sort of like she spoke to Al. I spoke with Al. He's an angel now, and that's how she sort of perceives Spawn. And Wanda's really touched by that, and she's shocked. And then she's further shocked when she's find out that, Terry killed some police out in front of their yard. Now, remember last issue, there was all these altercations. Terry Fitzgerald got into the shootout in his front yard, and was led to believe by the mafiosos that, they had Wanda and Cyan, their child, that they had kidnapped them and they were holding them hostage, but they were just at the park. And in any event, Wanda now apparently wasn't at the park. She was with her grandmother. She gets a call. Terry's, Terry killed these cops. Terry took off. Terry takes off. And of course, he eventually, Overt-Kill finds him. And this huge battle ensues between Overt-Kill in him. He's trying to kill Fitzgerald. He's trying to kill Terry. Spawn gets there just in time to rescue Terry. And a huge battle breaks out. And great action sequences. I mean, really great. This is where McFarlane shines. And as you sort of alluded to when we talked about this, it's just a lot of great action, and a lot of, sort of like the typical sort of dialogue, the shit-eating grinsy, the villains, the anger of Overt-Kill. He wants revenge. Spawn, using his newfound powers and his ability to use his powers that Houdini taught him how to better use his powers, and the chains and everything in previous issues. This all works to great effect. Meanwhile, the media is in front of Wanda's house. Jason Wynn is setting everything up. Jason Wynn has blackmailed all of her neighbors to say bad things about Wanda Blake and Terry Fitzgerald, because Jason Wynn needs a scapegoat, because the White House is coming down on him because he's been unable to explain his 2-day disappearance, where we readers know Jason Wynn disappeared and became anti-Spawn for those 2 days. And for whatever reason, Jason Wynn thinks he can manipulate events to blame Terry Fitzgerald for this intelligence disaster. And so that's what's happening. So Wanda's in a state of complete panic. Meanwhile, Terry is, being protected by Spawn as Overt-Kill tries to kill them both. And Vito Gravano did all he could to upgrade Overt-Kill, so he's much more difficult to kill. And what's actually surprising here, and I really enjoyed it, was, of all people, Twitch actually manages to save the day. Overt-Kill is getting one up on Spawn. It looks like Overt-Kill might even be victorious in the second battle against Spawn. But Twitch manages, expert marksman that he is, he shoots Overt-Kill in the ear, and it screws up his programming and makes him basically run off. And he starts saying the words "young blood, bad rock, young blood, bad rock," and I'm assuming that he sort of takes off, and there's an editorial box saying "see young blood number 7." So we're not going to be reviewing young blood number 7, but apparently Overt-Kill runs off into another comic book by Rob Liefeld's young blood number 7. But that saves Terry Fitzgerald's life, and also Spawn's life, because certainly Spawn, it appeared to have been in danger of being killed as well. And that's really how the issue ends, with Sam and Twitch looking over the bodies of a wounded Terry Fitzgerald and a very a very rough looking Spawn. So I enjoy the issue. I enjoyed the issue. It was exposition heavy at the beginning, but I'm glad that a lot of that exposition sort of disappeared and we could enjoy the action sequences and the narrative. And there was less exposition as the story progressed, and it was action packed. It had good dialogue, and it clearly established some of the emotions that Wanda Blake was going through and dealing with the media, and all this stuff does appear to be coming together. I've got some criticism. I still don't quite understand. I think it doesn't quite fit really neatly what Jason Wynn's plan is. It seems like it seems a little bit too convenient how the media is buying all this. But McFarlane has done his best to spoon feed us as to what it is, and it's good enough to put a smile on my face. I've been enjoying this so far. What do you think?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's one of the most action-packed issues that we've had to date, and I think it works on that level. It also, despite the heavy exposition at times, it's sort of one of the quick reads, because in those action scenes, when it's Spawn battling against Overt-Kill, and even the scenes with Sam and Twitch, and Twitch using his marksman skills to in a way take out Overt-Kill, or at least cause them to malfunction. There's not a lot of exposition needed, so it lets McFarlane do what he does best, which is render some great action scenes. There are a couple of nitpicks that I have. Um, First of all, and maybe I would have thought this a little more before 2016, or certainly before the pandemic, that friendships and loyalty among neighbors would be able to survive some bribery. But uh, I mean, does every person in the Spawn universe have deep dark secrets? Like, right? What when you talk about the neighbors, one set of neighbors is illegal immigrants, one cheated on their taxes, and one had a baby out of wedlock. I'm like, man, I would hope that not all my neighbors have some deep dark secret that can be exploited by Jason Wynn. So that was a little hard to swallow. The other thing is not really a nitpick, but just an observation that I actually think that I like. That's a great detail, because we talked last issue when we mentioned, or we've spoken previously about the body that Al Simmons has now is not his old human body, right? It's made of psychoplasm. And
Yeah.
we talked last issue about McFarlane saying that Spawn weighs 400 pounds, and we speculated on the density of psychoplasm and whatnot. And I talked about the fact that, Spawn's body only looks human, and he's got the parts, he's got bones, he's got a heart, whatever, but that's just because in his mind he knows that's what a human body is supposed to look like.
Mm.
That's illustrated very well when Twitch uses his marksman skills to blow out his knee, right? It even says, shot is a direct hit, tearing through cartilage and shattering a kneecap. It's the fastest way to disable an assailant, but Spawn never even breaks stride as he disappears into the unlit alleyway. So again, it goes to show that Spawn Spawn is not human, right? Like, you can blow away his kneecap, and it should stop him from running, and it would stop a human, but his body doesn't really work the way that a normal human body works.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a kind of a cool little reminder that McFarlane put in. And one other thing, you mentioned the accountant. One other thing that I just remembered, and I forgot to mention this last time, when I was doing the research on Tony Twist, and again, not sure why McFarlane went and changed the name. It ended up costing him all this money. But he apparently in an interview he did in Wizard Magazine, he talked about using names of hockey players. He's Canadian. He's a hockey fan. So that worked against him when it came time for trial. And Tony Twist, who was a defenseman, somewhat of a goon hockey player, which basically means that he was there to get in fights with the other team's best players, take them out of the game. There was another hockey player. That accountant's name, Joe Sakic, while it's spelled differently, there was a hockey player that played for the Quebec Nordiques back in the day,
Yeah.
named Joe Sakic. He did not sue, so I guess he didn't feel that he came off that badly.
Yeah.
So I forgot to mention that when we were talking about it last
Also,
time.
I happen to know Joe Sakic had a more successful hockey career. He probably didn't need to sue.
Yeah, 100%, 100% accurate. So yeah, I mean, again, action-packed issue. It read faster, it paced very well. Some of the better McFarlane art. I particularly like the the sequence where Twitch is trying to take that shot, how the panels flip between seeing Overt-Kill just pounding on Spawn, and zooming in on Twitch. You can even see the sweat on his forehead for the the stress of the moment when he's trying to make that shot. So yeah, all in all, a pretty fun issue, and I think the hunt concludes next issue. So and then we'll go from there. So yeah, solid issue.
Yeah, it was. It was good. It's going to be interesting to see. This almost felt like if there's another chapter to the hunt, it almost felt like an ending, this issue. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens next issue. I have not read the next issue yet. So
Yeah, I haven't either. So we'll see. I mean, Spawn, in a way, Spawn is at the mercy of Sam and Twitch with the way this one ends on a cliffhanger. And we do get, we can look at it. If you flip to the last page, you can look at it right there. He does, McFarlane does something that is pretty common in comics at this time, where it says concluded next issue. So we know the end of the story comes next issue. But yeah, both he and Terry Fitzgerald are at the mercy of Sam and Twitch there. And I wonder, despite the fact that Al Simmons has been trying to keep his identity as Spawn a secret from Terry Fitzgerald, if this is where the true identity of Spawn is finally revealed to Terry Fitzgerald. But even if it is, I expect Terry would keep it from Wanda. I imagine when he does find out, he'd have to have mixed feelings, right? Like, he knows that his wife has to still have feelings for her first husband, but I'm sure he's going to feel a loyalty to his friend. That's going to put Terry in a unique position. So I guess we'll wait and see.
yeah, I'm curious because those people who are familiar with the Spawn story already know the answer to this question, but I don't. I'll be curious to know who finds out that Al is alive first. Is it going to be Terry Fitzgerald, or will it be Wanda? Who's going to find out about that Al Simmons is alive first? Now, we know that Wanda was told by her grandmother this issue that her grandmother saw Al, but Wanda might just pass that off as my grandma believing in angels and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
But I mean, we also know that Wanda has had dreams of Al. Just at the same time, suddenly her grandma says that she spoke with Al, and now all this stuff is sort of hitting the fan. Wanda, lamented in this issue about how, she should have known better. She went from marrying one intelligence operative to marrying another, and now her life's fallen apart, and she should have known better, and what have you. And so Wanda herself is clearly going through some angst here, and she's got to be somewhat frustrated because, I mean, it was the secrets that she never knew about that killed her first husband, and certainly it was the secrets that her second husband never shared with her that seemed to be almost killed him this issue. So, I guess the moral of the story, if you're a woman, is don't marry an intelligence operative.
Yeah, and I think I had mentioned that before. I mean, granted, he wasn't a field agent, so maybe she felt a little safer.
Yeah.
And I think she kind of alluded to that this issue. But yeah, I mean, stop marrying intelligence agents, man. Yeah. So anyway, solid issue, and yeah, it all comes to a close. Next issue will be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, well, it was pretty good. It was short and sweet, and it's a good. Sometimes these issues are a little bit longer with a lot of exposition, but this one, it's funny with the exposition is because it might be good for new readers, but it's almost to a point where it's almost like I'm reading the exposition faster because it's saying the same thing in every issue. So it's like there's a lot of words on some of the pages, but it really is just ultimately a rehash. It's amazing how, quite frankly, and in this issue, I noticed it. I read it twice. The first time I read it, I literally breezed over the exposition, and I basically got the full substance of the issue.
Yep.
Not reading half of it. And then when I went back and actually read it, it never really added anything to it because I already knew all the stuff that was in the exposition anyway. So that's kind of a clue that, as a loyal reader that's been reading every issue so far, it is a little redundant for readers that are been with it from the beginning. But as you said, I mean, I suppose every potential issue of Spawn is for a new reader, but it can get a little frustrating, but it's also a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and there are times I'm tempted as well, but I always end up reading it because sometimes he does hide nuggets in there that you don't know. Like about how Jason Wynn got returned, how he was just found crumpled up in his office by the janitor. Like
Yeah,
that was just a random sentence thrown in, never mentioned anywhere else in the issue before or after. Um, but yeah, just trapped in a wall of text. So yeah, I think we've mentioned this before. That's the danger of exposition. If you present that, some people people who read comics don't there doesn't necessarily mean they love to read and they want to read something that's super dense.
yeah,
Like for example, the Hickman X-Men stuff. I know people that skip over those text pages that he adds in there and
mm,
they just don't want to read it.
yeah,
But you miss
but
out on some of
yeah, you
the
have to.
details.
That was the
Yeah,
only reason. That was one of the reasons I enjoyed House of X and Powers of X so much. I'm not an expert on X Men by any stretch, but that to me added that really helped me. I
yeah,
needed to read that exposition in the back of the Hickman's Hoxpox there,
yeah,
because it contributed substantially to my knowledge base of just to understand, you know, what underscored some of the plot points in the story. But
yeah,
yeah,
exactly. But again, you run the danger when you're doing it constantly and saying the same things. But again, part of what comics were like back then. So
yeah,
anyway, that's going to do it for this episode, everybody. Hope you enjoyed our recap of Spawn number 23 on Spawn Daily. Don't forget to go and check out Rocky's channel on YouTube if you have not done so already. If you're not watching these videos, you're just listening to the audio, just head over to YouTube, do a search for Comic Space Boom exclamation point. Subscribe to the channel, ring the notification bell so you know when new content comes out. Like this video. You know how to do it. Everybody knows how to do it on YouTube
yeah.
these days. Conversely, if you're checking us out on YouTube and you haven't been following the other audio content we put out on the Comic Source, we really appreciate it if you subscribe. So just head over to your favorite podcasting app or platform, Google, iTunes, Stitcher, whatever it is, Spotify, and subscribe to the Comic Source. Just do a quick search and you'll find us. So we really appreciate the support as always. Don't forget our other episode that's dropping today, as Rocky and I do every week, the DC Spotlight. Remember, there are spoilers. So if you haven't read the DC books and don't want to be spoiled, go read your DC books first and then come back and hear what we have to say about it. If you don't mind being spoiled, then dive right in because we cover all well, I won't say all, but most of the DC books that come out every week on those DC Spotlights. So we appreciate the support as always, and we will talk to you next time.
Catch you later.